Part 5 of turning my Toyota Prius into my fabulous tiny home. Hi, I'm Holly and this is my dog Emma Bear. In 2023, we took an 8-week, almost 10,000-mile road trip around the United States. I folded down the seats and made it work in my Prius, but honestly, it was pretty crowded. Every morning and every evening, I needed to rearrange the entire car. This is the 5th video in my Prius build series and how we took my car from this to this over the course of 8 weekends in the spring of 2024. You already know that Rocco was helping me build out my Prius, but he had also agreed to help me with another related side quest. On my first road trip, I drove almost 10,000 miles around the United States, and that included some really rough forest roads and terrain. After that trip, I did some research and discovered that there were Prius dwellers and Prius travelers who had actually lifted their cars. There was one company in particular that they were using called Prius Off-Road, where they were buying their lift kits and sometimes having them do the work. I hemmed and hawed about this for a while and eventually decided to pull the trigger on buying the lift kit. After that, I needed to call some shops around Los Angeles and see who could install it and how much it might cost. During these phone calls, I got a really wide range of how much they were going to charge me. And the other part was they either sounded like they didn't know how to lift cars or they just didn't think that they were going to be able to lift a Prius. Either way, I didn't feel confident taking my car to any of the people that I spoke with. I knew that Rocco had done some pretty serious and involved car projects, so when I talked to him about it, he was like, I think we could probably do it. So on this morning, the one that you're looking at, he said, so are you going to get started on the lift today? And I was like, oh, what? And he said, well, you watched the installation video, didn't you? And I said, yeah, kind of. But honestly, I had watched it from the point of view that he would be taking the lead on this. If there had been a video of my face during this, it probably would have been pretty funny. He was working on the interior design and said he'd stop when I really needed help with stuff, so I watched that installation video again and got to work dismantling the front of the car. Once I was done with that, Rocco stopped and we jacked up the car and he got the struts out so that we could put the spacers on top. At this point in the video, we're pretty much done and it's time to get the tires back on and the car back together up front. While I was disassembling under the hood, I found so many leaves, sticks, so much dirt, so I vacuumed out all the leaves that I could reach, and I also cleaned some of these components. Was it necessary? No. Did it really do anything? No. But look how clean it is. I was satisfied. As you can see, this took the majority of my day and I was filming it, so I wasn't filming what Rocco and Cynthia were doing back there when he wasn't helping me with the lift. By the time I had gotten the front of the car back together, they had finished the back part of the bench, which folds up and slides underneath the lip of the bridge. I drove home on the freeway and honestly, I was a little concerned that it was going to come apart like I was in a cartoon, but I'm pleased to report it was just fine. The next morning, I got to work on the rear part of the lift. It was different from the front, but ultimately it was much less complicated because I wasn't disassembling underneath the hood. And instead of putting a spacer on top of the strut, we were going to take out the spring and replace it with an even stronger, bigger, sturdier coil spring. After how long it took to do the front of the car the day before, this was basically a piece of cake with Rocco's help. I think we were done in under an hour. Now that the lift was done, I could get back to the interior of the car and seeing what Cynthia and Rocco were up to. The design for the front part of the car was getting started. They had already finished the back part of the bench and attached it the day before, and they had been working on the big flip-up cover for the back storage area of the car and the table that pulls out of it. A huge part of the build is something we call the arch, and they were just about to cut the first piece for that. In the meantime, I was starting something else. In the back of the car, on both sides of the pull-out table/storage area, we wanted to make covers. The one on the right was to cover the 12-volt battery, and we were also going to make a cover for the left side. We started calling these things the wings, and they turned out to be deceptively much more complicated than we anticipated. They had cut a big piece for the arch, and now they're getting it closer to the size it needs to be to fit in the car. And now he's jigsawing the basic shape of it and tweaking the end of it for where it's going to connect to the back of the bench. As you can see, the arch is an integral part of the front of the build, and it's what all the other compartments attach to. Quick little stop to say hi to my baby bear. And he's cutting some connection pieces for what he's working on. Emma staying cool on the cold garage floor. And we're all plugging along on separate parts of the build. To get the arch down to the height that he wants, they've decided that they need to trim off a little bit more, and then a little bit more. This saw table workbench thing was super helpful, and we were using it constantly. These thin little strips of wood that they've been testing out and now Cynthia is gluing and then screwing onto the arch are going to be the connection points to the seat and the back of the bench. This piece that Rocco's working on is going to go up against the center console that comes factory in the car. You'll see as we go on here, but there are several pieces of wood that fit together like a puzzle in the front of the build and then get screwed together. It's a very tight fit. Sin and I are continuing to work on the wings for the back of the car. Ultimately, we both felt like we spent way too long on these, but we just couldn't get them quite right. We were having trouble getting them level, especially for the one that was covering the battery on the right side. This is what it looked like when we got started the next morning. I went back to the wings, but Cynthia took over so I could get started on the next thing. This was another tricky section. We needed pieces of wood like this on both sides of the car. On the driver's side, it was going to run up and under the desk that was going to go behind the driver's seat, and on the passenger side of the car, it was going to connect to all of the compartments that are over there. Whatever these pieces turned out to be, they needed to be supportive, especially at night when the weight of Emma Bear and me would be on top of the entire build. As you can see, I had put together a very funky template. It has a cutout for the seatbelt and also for a weird hump in the floor. I started calling these things the boots because they look like weird wooden shoe boots to me. Anyway, Rocco drilled some holes in the corners to help me cut it out more easily, and I got to work with the jigsaw. While I'm working on this, Rocco is working on the design for the front part of the build. One of the important things that we're trying to work in is my plug-in cooler that I had on my first road trip around the country. I'm thinking that I might want a fridge eventually, but we decided to stick with my cooler for now. Cynthia's still working on the wings, trying to get them to fit better. So this is when I was introduced to the routing table. I had hand routed some other pieces, but this was really cool. You just take your piece of wood, keep it flat against the table, and run it along whatever bit you've installed on the table. It also ensures that you get a uniform, smooth, rounded edge all the way around. Rocco is jumping back and forth between designing the front passenger seat area and coming back to help me figure out the boots. We're moving the driver's seat back and forth, trying to see how this piece I just cut out is going to fit, and ultimately it's decided that we need to do an interesting modification. Instead of this boot being one big piece, it's actually going to be two pieces. The shape of the boot is good, but we need the top part of this piece to be closer to the wall of the car so that this piece really fits snugly for support. It would be nice if we could just cut off the top portion of this and attach it. So we're basically making a copy of the top part of the boot, but adding a little bit of wood on the bottom, and it's going to be attached to the already existing boot piece that I cut out. This means that the thickness of the boot is doubled against the floor of the car, which gives it more support and also helps it run really nicely along the wall of the car. I'm still working on the boots back there, and Cynthia is helping Rocco with the front design of the car. This complicated piece they're working on is going to fit very nicely against the original console of the Prius up front. After modifying the wooden boot for the driver's side of the car, I know what to do for the passenger side. This is basically the bottom part of the original boot, and now I'm tracing the top part of the original boot, and then they'll be bolted together for a mirror image of the piece we made for the driver's side of the car. Taking a look at where we're at, you can see how this was starting to come together to be the final result. This little compartment is going to serve two purposes. Firstly, my piano pedal is going to go on the floor, and then just above the piano pedal, there's going to be a spot for storage. Doing some more work on the wooden boots here. He's in there with his level, making sure that after attaching all these pieces, it's still going to be flat across the top. All right, let's get the top part of the passenger side boot cut out. And we've decided it makes sense to cut off the top part of the original driver's side boot. There just doesn't need to be that much wood. After we removed the front passenger seat, the sound system amplifier and the cables remained. The piece that Rocco's working on is going to cover those and keep them safe, and it's also going to be the resting spot for the plug-in cooler. It's time to join the two pieces of the passenger side boot. We decide to wrap up for the weekend, so we start gathering template pieces, putting tools away, and vacuuming so that we have a clean space to start in next weekend. You can see Rocco's still up there working on the design. I also wipe down inside the car and vacuum in there so that I have a cleaner car to drive during the week. I'm going to take some car parts back that we don't need anymore, get Emma's bed in there, and it's time to wrap up. During the week, I snapped a couple of photos of how it was coming together in the daylight, and I was really excited. Look how good it looks. All right, we're getting closer and closer to it looking like this.